Oh no. I accidentally clicked live too quick. Hello.
Hi, Todd.
Hey, I have to tell you something. I accidentally clicked live. So
Oh,
we're actually live. Nobody's in here yet, but I just want to let you know up front. It's a pleasure to
okay.
meet you. Let me put your name up here so people will know. Sheena. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Just let me just put on a little tune real quick, and then we'll get right into it. I want to share it. I want to tag you, um, and then share it through the network, and let people have some time to come in. So just give me a second.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't mean to do that.
No problem.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, here we are. We're live. So the live's working. 2 Facebooks, 1 YouTube, and 1 X. There you are. Shekinah Grace. Boom. All right. Now let me just share it to the network. Let's see here. Boom. Boom. Okay. All right. Let's see here. We got 6 people in the house. All systems are go. Here they come. There's 8, 9, 10. Okay. Let's kill the music. All right. We have a new friend in the house. We've never met before. I'm not sure right now how we connected. I'm not sure. I can't remember. I think you wrote to me, or I don't really remember. But it's a pleasure to meet you, Sheena. Thank you for coming in and sharing space with us and honoring us with your presence. And thank you for reaching out.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. It was you had made a post with specific
Yeah.
criteria
Oh,
that
yes.
it resonated for me. So you're kind of reaching out for people that could talk on those subjects.
Yes. And,
And I met you, sorry, I met you or I learned of you through
oh,
Mary
okay.
Bridget
Oh,
O'Donoghue.
my
Yeah.
God. Mary. Mary. Isn't she something? Right?
Yes,
Amazing.
yes.
Uh,
Hmm.
it's interesting because I put that post out and I'm still getting responses. Uh, and
Mm.
not to take anything away from anybody. One thing about doing what I've been doing for the last 13 years, 14 years, I realize that people don't get the memo. It's just human nature. I used to do a lot of public speaking, like in training people, and they would say that they only retain 10% of what you tell them. Say if you have a 2 or 3 hour symposium or whatever. Well, the same works with a post. People don't read it all, and it's just the way it is. It's no big deal. So some of the people have come on as has been established with the show to share their story and share their skills and abilities and the guidance that they've received right up to this moment right now that we're sharing. And then a couple of them, including you, said, "Yeah, we can talk about these subjects." I don't remember all the subjects, but I know what they all revolve around, and so I'm really happy that you mentioned that because I feel like it's really important. I feel like that the most valuable intel that we can receive at this stage of the game is having conversations with each other because we're the boots on the ground, you know, and
Mm.
we have this common denominator of, I am soul, but also that we've both been subjected to the same damn thing, So it's been quite a ride, and especially this last year. Seems like 25 was a whole different atmosphere, and 26 is just like on steroids. But yeah, so I don't know if it doesn't sound like you've watched the show for a long time. We've done over 4,500 shows, and we've been doing this 9 years. And the famous question is, have you always been this weird, or did you have a wake-up experience?
Um, a little bit of both, I would say. So I definitely. always felt drawn to spirituality, um, voluntarily or self-led or self-propelled. I wanted to attend every church in my town, which was not so common for like a teenager to want to attend all the different faiths, and sit in and experience sort of a universal message between them all. And that was kind of just a self-initiated process. Um, so that existed in me. But then, of course, through teenage years, if that wasn't identified or nurtured by the adults, in your, or just understood maybe on the same level, then of course I went down the path that most of us do of, moving further and further away from the self and making more and more decisions that went against the self, and then, had to find my way back to the self. So, but my brother did pass away. He died at a young age, um, through suicide. So that was a big wake up. I was only like 20 years old at the time, I think. So, and he was 2 years younger than me. So that was then the remembering, or the awakening to, I guess, other layers and dimensions to spirituality that weren't introduced through churches, or institutions, through religious faith. It was more, I became aware of like the shadow realms. I became aware of sort of what I describe now as like, it was like the hell realm or the hell on earth experience, partially, moving through my own. I mean, it's all us, at the end of the day. But there was a part of me also able to like witness, and had a curiosity about the systemic causes of that. Like, why is that common, and why is that accepted as normal? Or like something that we just kind of are like, it happened, and there isn't a deeper investigation as to like why would anyone want to do that in the first place. And it led to looking at so many things, how we exist as families, how we exist within communities, and then that extended out to birth certificate, and how right away we're raised by the system, like after 5 years old. And then it led to me wanting to learn more about my ancestral roots. And so I went and journeyed and traveled to grave sites and communed with ancestors. And then I traveled a little bit around the world. I went to Asia. I spent time in India and Nepal and Thailand. And so, yeah, and that was the catalyst. And there's just so much you could unpack, and I have sort of traced and tracked that journey, so that it could become real and teachable or shareable, with others, to really understand what this is, what is available to us through this vessel, and the spiritual technology we have. So I've always been quite serious about um, sovereignty, even though I didn't have the word for it, when I was young, and freedom. So one example of this was like, I really fought, screamed, and yelled at, my mother when I was being asked to go confess my sins to a priest in the Catholic Church. So that was just natural. But in hindsight, I realized there's something in my, like on a soul level, my soul lineage, where almost I'd rather die than be forced to do something against my will. Like it was almost that intense for me, that I would rather die than be inauthentic, or not have depth, or not have truth in my life, or not be able to decide for myself. But I made many decisions that went against myself due to conditioning and wanting to fit in, and yeah, people pleasing, not having kind of boundaries. Also having a little, having a little bit of an understanding that we're all one. And so that, until discernment is developed, it can be a little bit tricky when you know that. And it's like I could relate or identify with everyone and anything. And therefore, I became a massage therapist at one point, and it felt like I was just mopping up every every experience. And then it was very disorienting for my own soul path, to come back to my own essence and understand what was for me and what wasn't for me. And so that was a whole kind of phase of like earth school or like a university course in and of itself, to understand that. So everything I chose became something I I studied. I guess I also had that soul, imprint of like self-study because I really looked at my experiences under that lens. I wanted to understand them and, process them and make them more coherent, for myself so that they could be articulated and it could help others through my own process because of what happened to my brother. So, yeah.
Wow. Do we? I would love to have gotten all that in an hour and a half. That's perfect. That's a great summary. It really is. There's so
Mm.
much to unpack in there, but just through the energy of you, so much of it is being relayed. Through this above telepathic or whatever this new bandwidth that we're in, which is changing everything. I mean, I guess everything's changing. Now, I just want to now you're in British Columbia, right? You're on the west coast of Canada?
Yes.
Okay. And
Yeah.
you mentioned your age, but you don't look much older than what you're talking about. I know you're married because I poked around your page, just kind of just so I can kind of get a picture of it. Uh, how old are you? How long you been married? Do you have kids? Because you live. Is that your backyard, by the way?
Yes, we're in the mountains, and I saw your post today, Todd. I
Yeah.
just want to say when I read that, and at the bottom, when that lady spoke those words to you in Spanish, like it brought tears to my eyes. I just really felt something come through your post and that transmission. And yeah, it was really beautiful because I have, since the solstice, I have been watching your shows, and
Mm.
it's amazing how we can feel we get to know someone, in a short
Yeah.
period of time through these dialogues and just observing and tuning in.
Yeah.
So we are in the mountains. We're in the Kootenays of BC, and I was born in 82, so I'm
Gee.
43, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're young.
Yeah. Yeah.
No. No, I just because I know there's so much to it from what you explained, and let me just thank you for the comments that you made. And it was freaky to me too, by the way. I hadn't even thought about it until you said that, because I go to this store every night, and I had already the night before put a post up saying I'm leaving Mexico. I just got my marching orders. I'm going to the mountains, and I don't exactly know where. It could be obviously a plural. That could be a plural description, but yeah. So I went in, and they know me there, and I just said hello to her. I said, "Hey, I'm leaving in a few days," and then she said that to me, and my Spanish is still iffy, and because people speak in different dialects, if it's spoken in proper Spanish, I can hear it pretty well, and so I would have known what she said. I just couldn't understand her, and at first, and then I asked her to repeat it. Then I understood what she said, and she said, you are a new man. But it's one of these instances that's occurring that I think you're referring to with watching the show since since the solstice, where I'm having these situations. Well, certainly in a wordless way with the stars, with the animals, with nature, but also with other people, particularly children. Again, non-verbally, typically, but occasionally with an older person where it feels like my soul's talking to me through them. Like, why would this woman say this out of nowhere? It was more than just words. So that was the point of the post, was that we've landed in a different space now. It's becoming more and more obvious, and it operates in a totally different way. But I believe with what your story, your summary of your life, or of your understanding or your journey, for so many of us, that rings true as well. And it seems like that which guided you through the entire process right up to this point is the same energy that we're engaging in now. It's meeting us. It's not a delayed gratification or a delayed manifestation. It just seems to be front and center now. Wow. So you uh, have been on this journey the whole time. You've been pursuing this. How did it affect you know, your life in terms of, I want to say the normal things, but it's kind of a misnomer. But the getting married, the family. Uh, I know you're also a practitioner. Um, has this been an ongoing thing? Did you take a break? I know a lot of us have stopped. We had moments where we didn't do what was best for self because we were overgiving. We so many of us have these traits, and we pulled our power back. But how did that affect or not affect your life? Up to this point, did you find it to be congruent mostly, um, and fit in the flow, or did you have some ups and downs?
Well, the flame was steady for me, I would say. Like strong and steady was the course in terms of I have a very focused, if you want to consider like the soul signature that's represented through the birth chart. This is the best way I can describe for me because I've seen many charts and we're beyond the chart, but this is just like it did manifest to be quite, you know, accurate. When I compared my life before I even knew about things like astrology or the science of the cosmos in that from that lens to knowing about it, that like I have a very like concentrated chart. So all of my planets are in the same place. Like it's like stelliums all lined up together. And so I came here, I came here for the very specific purpose of this path. And there's not much that can distract me away from it. But that doesn't mean that it was easy, because I had to deal with all of the feelings and emotions of like not feeling like I didn't fit into like that family picture, the domestic picture, fit into sort of the normal things you do, even holidays and things like this. Different markers that society or we're conditioned to believe you're married at this time, you have children at this time, and you have a job. That was never something that I thought, oh, well, I just want to do that. And even today, like our marriage is very unconventional in a sense. Like my husband is also a healer, a practitioner, and we we met later in life. We just met in 27, or no, we met in 2017 and we married in 2020. Um, but the marriage, it feels more like it was the awareness of co-creation consciousness is present. And I think my partner and I both had arrived at a place of being okay in ourselves, being grounded within who we are to a certain point. I mean, lots came up when we met. So for that final unraveling and purification continued when we met. We had no honeymoon phase, but we had the spiritual maturity, I would say, to to understand what was taking place from that like bird's eye view or that spiritual perspective. So all the human stuff, we were able to develop a level of witness that allowed us to move through the purification that got us over many humps in our relationship where I think maybe most people might think it's finished or there's no chance or it shouldn't continue. And that might be true. In a lot of cases it is, but we were just a bit older and we were both on a very committed spiritual path. And once again, that wasn't easy because it wasn't really accepted. It wasn't really, maybe it was, there was an attempt to accept, like for parents, etc., for to accept it, but so I don't want to say that they weren't accepting, but it didn't feel like acceptance because they didn't understand it. So when people don't understand, you can feel misunderstood. You can feel like you're not accepted, and that's really difficult when you're kind of the only one. And in my case, I'm the only child of my parents. So or like my brother and I were. So I became an only child in that moment. And that was I'd say that was the most difficult part for me because there was a level of attachment that came, that like an extra level of attachment that kind of came onto me from my parents because of the loss of their son. And so I got lots of lessons through that child-parent bond, and what can happen when we don't understand the soul and the process of the soul and the death and rebirth, or these levels of understanding. We don't have an understanding or a true integrated knowing and belief in the eternal soul and eternal life. Then I witnessed that. I witnessed the grieving and how, that process and different blockages that can create. And I witnessed the feeling of someone being so attached to me that I felt like I couldn't breathe. And so that gave me the lesson of like this non-attachment piece, right? So there was just like, it's to narrow it into, anyways, to come back to the point around, you said, has it been hard? I would say, yeah, it has. I often tell people that I was in like a dark night of the soul or dragged into the underworlds right up until 2019, like coming out of it in 2015, slowly, more and more out of it. By 2017, I felt like I had self-love back. Like I felt like I loved myself, which is probably why then Robert and I were able to meet. Um, and and then in 2019, right before COVID, I was starting to experience that like kind of wobbly dimensional shift where suddenly it felt like I was witnessing like a 3D movie and I was in like a 5D experience. And I almost felt invisible to scenes like if I walked into a mall, for example, and I was watching all the people in the mall and the food court and stuff, and I felt like they couldn't see me, but I was just watching this reality. And I was ready for my heaven on earth experience. I had done all this work and I felt so ready for heaven. I had cultivated a level of heaven within my own being that I was starting to witness it in the external. And then COVID hit and I felt so ripped off for at least a year. But it was just everything I had been witnessing was just coming to the surface for the rest of, the entire collective to really see with their eyes wide open. And yep, so we had the skills to kind of navigate through that. And luckily for myself, my parents woke up at that time, so there wasn't a clash in kind of fighting or getting into anything like that. Like we were able to actually become more harmonized as a family. They started to realize that some of the things that I had been doing or talking about were now they were seeing and understanding that better. And so I kind of my ego got the validation that it needed to kind of start to heal. And then our family became closer through their awakening as well. So yeah, that was really beautiful. So I
That's
would say
fascinating.
over the last 5 years, there's been a lot of harmonization, and all of the stuff that felt difficult before has been really working itself out quite naturally. And it was my prayer. Like after my brother passed away, I was decided that I actually wouldn't have children until my family was healed and my family karma was cleaned up, and that I understood the ancestral connections there. And so it was quite strong-willed in me to heal. And I would even say things like that to my parents that like, in moments of misunderstanding, just tell them with tears in my eyes that I care so much about our family's healing, So yeah, it's that's been, and they're so supportive now. So yeah,
Wow.
it's good.
Wow. Very eloquent. Very well done. And this is what I've been looking for, and it's been happening more and more, even without putting that post up. I've been saying this since last summer, people are showing up on the show in their full humanity. The multidimensionality but they're full humanity in tandem, hand in hand. It's no longer, and we've all had our ego challenged by the information and the validations and all the things that we've experienced, and then that's part of the journey is to find the balance there. So it's perfectly understandable, but to have a conversation where the conversation itself is capturing the essence of what we really have here. In other words, all that stuff that we've been receiving that's been coming to us, and we came into this game with that. But for whatever reason, we lost memory of it. So that's been a big part, the past life remembrances or visitations or dimensional experiences or meditation experiences, plant medicine, whatever it is, it seems like it's gotten to a point now where we have reached a level of humility that's starting to really show. And you really put that out there. So, I'm saying this because I went to your page, and, these days it doesn't take long to read a situation, right? I mean, we're all tapping in. So you're obviously very devoted. You're very devoted to your practice. Your words, some of the words I love to write, I guess I'm a poet, and I like to do conscious rap, melodies and songs and such. But so I can see your level of depth in the words that you write. It's very much like Rumi-esque or, something along those lines. So there's a prose additive to it, right? So to having said that, yet you still show up, you answer the call, you understand, even without having put the post up or you even said anything, it's very obvious that through your words, you understand the essence of it all is the experience itself, and it's real time. It's not, we're going to get there, or I was this in a past life, or I can do this, watch me jump through a fire hoop, or whatever the case is. This is like, hey, this is how it's gone. This is the process that I've gone through, because that's the real intel, the real intelligence to me, because we've not been able to discuss it. We've not been able to discuss it in a clean atmosphere. And obviously some of it's very, very sensitive, like with your brother, okay? Many of us can relate to something like that. I can, and my children can. And so, this is real. This is where you made the reference to your parents waking up. It sounds like COVID probably woke them up, like happened to my parents who were in their late 80s, and having those discussions and going, wow, people are really figuring this stuff out. So, and I love the way too that you cite the reason you're here. And I really feel like that's the most important thing, because it has been, like in your retelling for so many of us, these fluctuations, these testaments of faith, and these phases where your faith is tested. And so, it's very refreshing. And there's so much we could get into, like even your connection in your marriage. I mean, that in itself is a grand, huge accomplishment, to be able to go through this period that we've been going through collectively by ourselves is one thing, but to do it with someone else and come out the other side with them. And I love the way too that you didn't hold any punches back and said, yeah, we get to these situations where you may not go on, but it's our, devotion to self ultimately is what I heard. Ultimately both sides are taking care of business in-house. And, you hear some people talk about these relationships and they'll be like, oh, well, you hold each other accountable. And I guess in a way, the energy itself does it, because the impression I get when I hear something like that is, oh, I'm going to tell you this and I'm going to tell you that. I don't think it works that way. I think it's actually holding ourselves accountable, and then the other recognizes it, and you're actually mirroring each other as well. So that's really powerful. And you live in the mountains, and you're in a very spiritual, lit, energetic area. So there's a lot there going on. Now you, like I said, I went to your page. You write some really, really deep stuff. You can see the devotion. You can see some of the stuff that you're putting out there, inviting people. And I know you work with couples and you work with individuals as well. What are you seeing in your practice now with the people that are coming to you? Are you seeing a change in the last few months or the last year? Are you seeing evidence of what you've seen in your parents, a greater sense of awareness of self and of what's going on in the collective? What are you seeing with your clients?
Well, yeah, I see. Um, I guess for a long time, part of the struggle for me was that I felt like I spoke a different language, that I felt like I spoke the language of soul. And I really longed for that dialogue. I really longed for that interaction and resonant, understanding the word as the word of God, if you want to say that, or as like the vibration that lands on the body and heals it. So I didn't have necessarily a lot of people in my field or relational experiences where I felt like I could just let that flow and it be really received and felt more than understood, or that there could be this back and forth. And I would say since COVID and sort of the people that maybe I'm just more coherent myself, maybe I'm a little bit more clear and grounded in my vessel, that I'm starting to attract the right, if you want to say clients or just people into my life that want to have that exchange. And so that is really refreshing to me. So I feel like I don't have to explain myself. I can just let the authenticity of my true heart's voice and expression to flow. And there's a greater understanding, I think, of energy, or that we can just feel something and know something rather than have to intellectualize it. And so that makes my work really a lot easier. But I've also learned how to gently guide and prepare someone for that, to relax the body and just open to receiving, and reminding myself and people I work with that they don't have to know here. They just have to remain in a field of openness and acceptance towards whatever arises within them, in the moment. And I'm just sort of a guide in that process. But my passion is really the body at the moment. And, helping people and kind of advocating for and kind of cheerleading humanity on, in terms of like understanding this manual that we have. Have we read it? Do we understand it? Can we hear it? Can we commune with it? Can we listen to it? Can we receive our guidance? Can we understand where we're holding distortion and make the corrections? And then can we also open ourselves up to receiving the angelic codes, of the original divine blueprint, or those prime intentions of the human vessel, and of the body, of the anatomy, and like helping people to recognize, because through the age of Pisces, enlightenment was a thing, and we escaped the body in all the ways that we possibly thought we tried through every method, including meditation, to leave the body. And I'd say the paradigm shift now is since Sophia's return and the energy of the Divine Mother's like come back, to the planet, we're starting to have a natural curiosity and interest in the body of wisdom, and experiencing our bodies and our human experience as this like phenomenon, this like a magical thing. And if we can get on board with that, like everything is within us. Everything is encoded there. All the secrets of the universe, the cosmos, um, like anything we need to understand about our health, like everything, in all the molecules, all the elements, the periodic table of elements, the entire everything is there. And so what I do is I guide people into their body to basically communicate with all their body systems, and learn where there might be a distortion, understand where some healing integration needs to take place, and then figure out, ask for real practical instructions to make it real in the embodiment and in the life, in daily life, and then kind of relax their focus to open themselves up to see their own angelic template or Templar, their own angel self, their higher self, as it's like landing and integrating in the body. And so there's this feeling that we need to fully land inside the body, become fully ensouled, this and fully interfaced with, if you want to call it our higher self, or I mean even beyond that, like I feel like the like really creating the space and preparing the body to hold that much light, the fullness of our soul's light in the body, is the process that Jesus or Yeshua moved through. It is the resurrection of the codes. We're no longer in the lie of separation. We're no longer in the sinner mode. We're no longer in this believing the lies about ourselves. There's a resurrecting of consciousness of the truth within our being, which catalyzes like the transfiguration of light and creates the space, and starts to create the room and make this vessel inhabitable for the soul to land fully. So we must fully materialize before we can spiritualize. And then once that catalyzed process takes place of the transfiguration of light, then we begin to experience ascension. And I always joke, because I was born on Halloween, so I joke that like when I die, at first I would say that people will find me in meditation pose and just my skeleton would be there. But I now want to take my skeleton with me also. So, um, and not
I
leave
get it.
anything
I get what you're
behind.
saying. Yeah. Well, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
there's something to that too, though. One of the things that we're learning is the linear and the literal from our human perspective as a standalone isn't going with us. Like, so when things are said, there's more than just what we think they're said literally, but there's been a lot written about we're taking our body with us this time. And what does that actually look like? What does that mean? I don't know, but it sure feels right to me with the conversations I've been having. And then listening to you again, that's a second mic drop, by the way, in my opinion. That whole dissertation was perfect. But I'll start here. I remember in the beginning of 2025, latter part of 24 on the show, people started talking about their body's voice, that their body was a consciousness that they hadn't seen yet. We have the galactic and the elementals and the angelic aspects and so on and so on. Yet here we are in spirit flesh, and it's actually the center command post of it all. And I'm like you, like I'm having these conversations and I'm going, well, is it me or is it them? But I think it's both. It's like the chicken and the egg. What comes first? Well, in this math, it's more too comprehensive or incomprehensible for the old human construct of a mind. It works. So it's a simultaneous kind of spiritual chemical reaction or something. I don't know, but I have to say that I've heard more and more people talking about it as time has gone on, and it's been a real big topic this year. I know for me, it's been, I would describe it the exact same way. I've had so many occurrences where my body has told me, you need to do this, you need to do that. This is what it is, and it's pretty amazing. I had an episode, I've talked about it, so I won't talk about it, but on the red blood moon, I had 15 grand mal seizures in 10 hours. And having had a history of them between the ages of 15 and 50, I knew, what the potential danger was, or whatever you want to put it. But my body told me, because this all happened from like 11 o'clock at night to 9 in the morning, my body told me, you don't need to go there. You don't need to go to the ER. You don't need to go to the doctor. This is a spiritual experience at its core, not a physical experience. You might have some physical characteristics of symptoms and such that you might attribute to this or that, but this is not to be confused with a physical experience. It is physical, but it's rooted in the spiritual and the energetic field. And what you described earlier, I'm not saying that I'm walking on water by any means, but what you described earlier was so perfect in that there was, I would just tell you how it kind of came to me was there was something still within my body in total. So if it's the physical, it's the rest of them. And it'd been with me a long, long time, like eons. And I would imagine this is similar, at least metaphorically, with everybody. I wasn't whole, and it was deep in my root. So I went through this process of these seizures, which involved other things, vomiting and such, and I'm having this whole experience. 3 times I popped out of my body, and uh, eventually I could feel this thing rise out of my lower chakras and release. But at the same time, there were all these aspects of me that were trying to push in finally. Like they come in, they come out, they come in, they come out, yet they all were coming in together. And that in itself created a certain reaction from my body as well, because it was very electric. In particular, I'm sure there was some magnetics involved. But yeah, the body, it was like the message was, I guess in a sense, you're coming out the other side now. And as a result of that, a lot of stuff within you is getting cleared up. We're cleaning you out like rotor-rooter kind of thing. And so from that experience, which I can't be the only one, because of the time we're in, that was that red blood moon. We had just come out of the eclipse corridor. Now we're in this equinox corridor and so on. So many things have changed in my body, in my mentality, in my emotional quotient, in my physical things such as what am I eating, what am I doing. It's weird. And I have been, other than the first 4 or 5 days, because it took a lot out of me physically, I have been getting every day, like even now, I have been getting like this equilibrium in my body, which is no inflammation, no pain, lots of energy. And I've been on a bland diet since then, by the way. So it's not what I'm eating. There's something going on internally that we've been talking about for years. And I really feel like that and other things, other higher sensitivities and abilities are coming online now. Not just this telepathy and this collective network of that we have activated through our own internal deep dives. You know what I mean? So how does that sound to you? What are your thoughts? Do you feel like that we're reaching a point now where the transformation right down to the biological and the physicality is actually occurring, and we're starting to embody or turn on? Because I'm really starting to believe that we're not pulling anything in so much, it's turning the stuff on within us, right? But do you feel like that we're actually getting to this point where we would, by the old standards, be taking on supernatural, psychic abilities, et cetera, et cetera?
I believe so. You know, the synchronicities have amplified to like 100 a day or more. You know, a lot of people I know and talk to say the same thing, and you know, is I like so that's one indicator that there's something accelerating or there's been a shift enough for us to actually sustain moments within that field of what we would have called miracles before. And, you know, I feel like when we're so embodied with presence, that the miracle is the reality. It's not so much that we're looking for miracles, and we're starting to embody that miracle realm. We're starting to tap into creational abilities that are arising from within. They're arising from the inside out. There's less grasping for techniques outside of what is universal, the universal human experience, which is that we all share the experience of having a body with that has sensation with sensations, and we all share the experience of being able to breathe the one breath or the breath of life. And to what degree, who knows? Like I said, I feel like I do believe that's more online for it's more accessible for people, but it's also my reality now. And so I'm not sure if that is true and real for everyone. I don't know because it's kind of like that mall experience I told you about. Like, we could be in this new earth frequency. We could be existing already in, like, with both feet more in that heavenly reality and embodiment, that we're not even aware that there's places and spaces on the planet that aren't existing in that same frequency or same realm. And we might witness things, but I don't know if that makes sense. So in my reality, yes, everyone that kind of spirals into my reality is experiencing this. And so that for me is becoming more and more of the world that I'm living in and I'm grounded in and anchoring and experiencing. And but I do feel like that with the earth is changing, and I feel like that's really supportive too. I feel like with COVID, there was just a catalyzing interest in what is health and what is our connection to nature. And I think that was really like the pressure point that made us really ask the deep questions. So, one of your points on your post on Facebook was about integrity, I think. And I remember posting something about health integrity in maybe it was 2021, and how important it was going to be to like self-reflect on what does that mean, pure health integrity. And but I think it's a cascade. Like I think it's overflowed into places and spaces we never would have thought that people would be asking those questions. And yeah, the collective consciousness is expanding and opening up to the miracle realm of possibilities and remembering their ability to as a creator, I and also just for me, like I've always repeated, like that the I will never stop repeating that we're children of the Most High. If we can reconnect to that energy, that changes everything. If we can feel that deeply, that we are sons and daughters of God, if you want to call it God or eternal Mother, Father, God, Source, that changes everything how we think about ourselves. And, I'd say that's one of the first steps. If we have issues with our human parents, this is the first step of divine reconnection to a father, mother. And then from there, we learn how to process and witness and see our own parents as divine, you know. Um, so I kind of went off on a tangent there, but I do see it and I do feel the shift. And I do think it is happening in places that I maybe would have least expected it to start to come on. So, and I do feel like it is coming more from the inside out because we had to learn how much we invested in external authority and how much we were tricked and we were fooled and we were, betrayed by that. So, yeah, I think it's activating something internal, which could start with the passion flame. Because once we're angry about something, when we woke up, we wake up and we realize what's been going on, that ignites something. And I think that is like the re-sparking of the original spark, if you want to say, like, or a spark turned into that truth flame. And now there's like a hunger for truth, and the flame is burning in people, and some are moving through, the part of that process that is more purifying in nature, purifying the anger frequency and but they'll get there and they'll come up and raise that up into the compassion field of the heart. It has to be that way. That is part of the process from passion to compassion. And so those we witness who haven't yet entered fully, or they're not, they're still not able to maybe access that compassion field, or the heart's come fully online. They're still integrating the ego structure and figuring out their new identity, because everything they thought they believed prior, it's like the rug got pulled out from under them. So there's a total loss of self identity, and there has to be a rebuilding of that in a healthy way in order for that compassion to really come online. So those of us who have moved through that, and we can hold the compassionate witness gaze upon the collective, or these groups of people, that will support and help to catalyze their process of entering into the heart more swiftly than maybe we were able to, because we didn't have those compassionate witness eyes to look upon us and say, just know and know that they'll get there. Yeah.
That's a third mic drop. Yeah, that was very well put. I mean, I don't even know what to say. I mean, it's you covered a lot of territory there. This, yeah, I mean, even the way that you refer to the different levels of evolution in a snapshot moment, I think speaks to the changing consciousness, the maturity, the return, the resurrection to soul. In that, I've had so many people come on and talk about those people were asleep over there, and those people were this, and those people were that, and I'm going, am I missing something here? This embodiment is kind of, to me, it's been like the beginning of last year after that solstice in 24. I know my soul came in about 5 days later and said, everything's changed now, and you're going to be swimming with the current. You're not going to be swimming against it, but it's going to be weird because you're not used to it. So a lot of this stuff has been coming in, and we're just becoming more receptive to it. But the last part of what you said, I mean, really rings true for me, which is it's your your vibration, your illumination, your band of frequencies that is what it is, regardless of who you tell or who you talk to or don't talk to. You could be in a cave, and you're affecting the entire grid. You're contributing your highest potential, and there's a real contagious aspect to that. That's the real virus, And then the other thing that you're talking about too, and I like, I kind of don't have a lot of polish all the time, but spent some time on the streets, especially my first 2 years when I woke up. I chose to go homeless to pursue exactly what you were talking about in your own journey. And but it's like we're in the no bullshit zone now. We can't lie to ourselves anymore. We can't stay in a situation that's uncomfortable. Either something has to be said or something has to be done. These are not egoic movements. These are soul rhythms. I said for many years on the show, and I didn't even know what I was really saying, which I think comes to a lot of us. You don't actually embody it maybe, or the understanding. But I used to say all the time, listening to people like this, and I'd say, man, maybe the biggest challenge we're going to have is getting used to our natural nature after being discombobulated for so long. Because the magic and the miraculous that you're talking about is our natural nature. This is our natural nature. And these 100 synchronicities that are happening every day, I'm with you. I laugh. I cry, and I'm like, how could this happen? It happened to me last night, I mean, I got the marching orders, you're going, where am I going to go, what am I going to do, am I going to be on the road like I was for years, living out of a suitcase and just throwing, caution to the air and just throwing up, or what's going to happen? And my daughter hits me up and says, hey, there's this little studio in the back of our house, and it's this big, and it's got its own this bathroom, and we're gonna rent it for $500 a month. And I'm like, well, hang on to it. Send me some pictures. And she sends me a video. But this was a synchronicity. I saw it for what it was. And the other thing that's really started to make a lot of sense to me is, it used to be, oh my God, 11/11, and oh my God, this happened, and it was kind of like an aberration. Okay. And like you said, now it's becoming more frequent because it is our natural rhythm. It's our natural nature. And it's basically predicated on how open our heart is. It's, you think an open heart, well, that's how you begin to experience higher levels of telepathy, but it's also the road to seeing those little cookie crumb trails that we left to get back home through these synchronicities. It's like the universe is winking at us more and more and more and more. And especially since this red blood moon thing, to me, it's just gone off the charts. So to have a conversation like this and to, not that we do that here, but not to be mired in the muck of conspiracy theories and disclosure. I'm not taking anything away from those things because certain things that get you to a certain place aren't going to go with you to the next place. And like you were talking about, the anger, the cycle of getting angry and going, oh my God, 9/11 was an inside job, or COVID was a bunch of BS, and you start to get pissed off, and then you start to get pissed off at yourself. How could I be so stupid? I love those moments, by the way. I don't have any major strides in wisdom unless I get to what I call, oh my God, I was stupid moment. How did I not know? Well, you didn't know because you get to the higher vantage point, then you can look down and see things that you couldn't see before. That's another thing that I think is happening that I think is directly related to the body, which, and I'd love to hear your thoughts because this is your forte, not mine. But this lack or lessening or diminishing self judgment seems to have a direct link to transformable health, regeneration, healing, alignment in the body. At least that's what I'm picking up because I've been working on this part of it since 2021, right around COVID, when COVID started to peak. And I started to go through a certain process that was taking me to that inner dialogue. So things were popping up, in other words. Things were popping up. And as they would pop up, the first thing I would do, put my hand on my heart and say, no judgment. No judgment. Now let's pull the pieces out and let's take a look at this stuff. But even having been on the path, which is very similar to yours, in for so many years or whatever, did not realize how embedded the program was within ourselves, which is the only place it really matters, right? So, to hear this story where it involves your parents and involves those loved ones around you and the people that you come into contact with and your description of how, well, I don't know if it's this way everywhere, but everywhere I'm going, it seems to be. And I can relate to that too. So it's going to be interesting to get on the road and see how that plays out as well. But my gut feeling is, whether it's my 89-year-old father who I talked to a couple nights ago, or my mom who's 87, or whoever, I'm seeing this change in all of them. And again, I go back to what you said. Is it me or is it them? And it doesn't even matter because if it's one or the other, it's both, isn't it? Do you feel like that?
It's
What effect do you feel like that the lack or the lessening judgment of self has on our health?
Yeah. Well, I totally feel you, and I feel it's also synonymous with self-love. So, either way, non-judgment or coming into just devotional self-love, like regardless of everything, that hand on the heart is something I practiced for probably a whole year. I spent an entire, when I was in that 2015 period that I talked about, and I realized I had a bunch of not great relationships, some very challenging, I would say, even on the edge of like abusive, more on the emotional mental level, just not doing so well. There was the tipping point for me that I realized like I'm the common denominator and I wasn't being treated very well. And so I had to decide, like, what does self-love actually mean? And it started for me with like committing to massaging my own feet before bed, like giving myself the kind of care and loving touch that I would my massage clients. Or, or looking in the mirror and just looking in my eyes until I can see the sparkle or the light and telling myself I love you. And and then I got it back into dance. So that was for me, that was really powerful, and being devoted to a physical practice because it helped me to keep out of my head and come more into my body. And dance is a passion of mine, but I trained in classical Indian dance. That's what I went to India for. And so it's like a yoga. It's like a yogic tradition. So it's not just kind of dancing. It definitely yokes you. It opens up channels in the body, meridians. The idea is that you're creating, you're mirroring the geometry of the body with the sacred geometry of the universe. And then of course there's a devotional component to devotional dance in India. So that was a perfect match for someone with my constitution. And I danced 3 days a week for 3 years. So that was, and that was pretty dedicated. And just showing up regardless how I felt about it. So it takes effort in the beginning. It takes the effort, and sort of, if discipline triggers anyone, I always say, well, then just shift it into devotion, because they're a similar thing. And discipline, I was kind of going deep in the kind of in this, what is the root of discipline? And the word discernment is in there. So I think it's about developing the powers of discernment. And I think the etymology of it is to learn. So you need to apply discernment and have an intense desire to learn something new. And that's all discipline is. But it was also inverted. We had disciplinaries in our lives in school, or father figures or mother figures or whatever. And so I think the world in general lacks the ability to focus, to concentrate, to apply self-discipline without it like triggering trauma, to hear the word discipline. Anyways, that was a little bit of an aside, but I feel like, I knew that I had to see this through a whole year of just self-love. What does it mean to love myself without having a partner in my life? With and I felt started to feel so good that I actually just wanted, I didn't want a partner. I just felt so good to be in love with myself. And but it fluctuates. Then came COVID, and a whole new set of purification and unlayering the onion came in. And I still had to do this daily practice of being aware of the dialogue, the internal dialogue, and disrupting the pattern. So as soon as it was coming on, quickly disrupting it, whether it was with like a movement or going outside or putting my bare feet on the earth or taking a breath or reframing it into like an affirmative or a life affirming belief. So examining beliefs has been a part of my journey as well, deep to look at the biology of belief and how we create certain diseases, in the body, and experiences that are it's only vibration. That we become a vibrational match to more chaotic experiences in our externals. So I totally relate to what you're saying, and self-love, I think, is the remedy for projections of judgment, or love is sort of the corresponding frequency that helps to overcome that that the judgment. So they're hand in hand. We're both sharing, the two sides of the same coin there. And that's monumental. If people haven't embarked on that yet, that's probably one of the very first steps, is to how would you, and it has a lot to do with the inner child, I feel, initially. If we can't look in the mirror and see our adult self with compassion and love, then it's helpful to remember the inner child and to talk to that. So your inner dialogue is communicating with that part of you as though it were a child. So how would you talk to a child who was hating on themselves or judging themselves or bullying themselves or criticizing themselves? You would have a gentle tone, a loving tone, and you would kind of coach or gently steer that stream of conscious thought into something more aligned and loving and harmonious. And we have to talk to ourselves in that same way because that's just what we have to do. We weren't, because of the thousands of years or, and beyond of this lack of support, and not understanding how to nurture a small being, from the get-go through this. We have to reparent ourselves. And then slowly our job of reparenting ourselves is over, and then we can get into the really fun stuff of like the sort of the spiritual training and moving through initiations with a little more mastery and like fascination. It's really exciting. But yeah, it's tricky in those moments of the negative self-talk.
Yeah.
And it still comes up for me. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're we're still, my old friend Earl used to say, as long as you're in the body, you're still subject to the human condition. So it's a never, it's never ending. It continues. But yeah, just going back to what you're saying, it is one and the same thing. I look at like the things that I put on that post in regard to the pursuit of a higher degree of self-love, because that's also a higher degree of universal love. But it's these particular topics and aspects that I haven't seen taken on in the world of processes and modalities. And part of the reason for that is because things have changed and our awareness has changed and our abilities have changed. Our openness has expanded. There is a contagion in the field. It's not being talked about. It's not being written about. It's moving so fast that you'll find it in a conversation talking to someone like you. But so, in other words, how do you get there? Somebody talked about Amanda said the 5-minute self-mirror. I talked about speaking to myself. You talked about speaking to yourself. Talked about the inner child. I think for me, and you said this earlier, and I've been blessed to be in this beautiful, authentic, non-commercialized Mexican town, full of families and dogs and horses and children and just that's like 5D, it's been crazy. But going through the transitions and the different shifts, I'll work like today, do 2 shows, and, I might have been feeling not so good or whatever, or something's on my mind. And so I go for a walk and I just walk, or I'll go to the beach and take my shoes off and put my feet in the sand and I'll just sit there. And I'm amazed at how quickly things get neutralized in the dialogue that I had, the internal dialogue. And it clears things up because the question and answer session is still there, but it's not muddied by prejudices and biases and hang-ups and conditions, and it's just more of a free flow thing. And I know this because I laugh a lot, and occasionally I'll shed a tear, right? But it's wordless, and I think movement is very big. I'm a dancer too. You wouldn't know it, electronic and hip hop. I learned it on the streets when I was 50, and did it I haven't for the last 4 years, but it's such a perfect example. I often go back to that time because for 2 straight years, I mean, it was every night. And I was unaware in those moments of anyone in the building, no matter how busy the club was. I'd never danced with other people. I'd have women come up to me and want to dance. I'd know, I'm just in my own world. It was anchoring my soul. So there'll be times when, like a week ago, after going through the seizures and, the things that I went through in my body and everything that it brought up, obviously things come up that have to be looked at. We know this. So I would sit with them, and I couldn't easily turn off the old recording, the old chatter. And so what I would do is I would take myself back to the moments on the dance floor where I was in my own world, so to speak, a lot like what happens in the beach. And I joke about it because people, like if I'm walking down the street, I'm talking to myself, and people will like look at me like, what? Or I'll be at the beach and they'll hear me laughing. Who's he laughing with? I'm not on my phone. I don't even carry it with me, right? But there is something to be said for immersing yourself within yourself. And this isn't about boundaries and walls, and this is about what I call the universal isolation, where it's just you and the universe. And like you said, you have these thresholds that you cross, such as you're so happy and in bliss and joy and love with yourself, you're not even thinking about having a partner. And then I bet the next part of the story was he popped in. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's it's refreshing because there's so many different, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with modalities or processes at all, but there is an intelligence that's moving into the field that's superseding the intellect, and the capacity of, for lack of a better word, the client, the capacity of the person is greater now. So to me, there's a real call within myself to share and to be, and that is to recognize people for who they are right now, not who I thought they were or who they were, but to actually look into the mirror that they are, and that in itself can bring about a whole new level of coherence, perhaps like you experienced with your parents. And to be honest with you, I have too. I didn't speak to my mother for 6 years, my father for 8 years, and about 3 years ago, it all just fell into place. And I made the rounds with them and the rest of the family, and it was very organic and very natural. But again, was it? And then I started to notice, wow, they're changing. Now, was it me, or was it them, or is it both? And does it matter? And that's the other thing. That's the last thing I'd say. It's so humbling to get to a point, and weird, and temporarily uncomfortable, to get to a point and say, I don't need to know anymore. I don't need to know. I think you said this earlier when you just sit. Or like I had this bird come to the beach. I talked about this 12 nights in a row. This bird came to me. 12 nights. And finally, at the end, when my lesson was learned, I said to him, well, why aren't you talking to me? Like words. And I just got crickets. And I said, am I just supposed to sit here and stare at you? And he said, yes, that's it. And so I thought, oh, well, that makes sense because I've done that with myself. Now, why wouldn't it make sense to do it with another? And sure enough, then the dam broke and all the information came in. And, I guess I graduated, at least that particular class. But yeah, I love the down to earth, humans fully present. In fact, the humans on point. Like the way that you discuss everything and what I feel and what I'm seeing with people. It's like we flipped it. We thought we were the low species, the redheaded stepchild of the monad, or, our team or whatever. And we're actually in equality, but because we're the boots on the ground, we are on point. And we're the last factor. We're the last part of the alignment. And I feel like we're stepping into this now. And I really feel like our minds are going to be blown with where we go from here and how fast we do. Thanks.
Yeah, I just jotted some things so I could remember because there was lots that you shared, and I wanted to remain present, but coming back to that person asking, well, how do we do it? And what popped into my mind, and you were speaking to this, you immediately went into sharing how you get up and you go move your body and you walk to the beach, you know? And I think that's it. I think it's so simple as honoring the impulse, the in the immediate now moment. What is the rising impulse? Not and recognize, like, it's so easy to recognize when we're stuck in an old pattern because it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel evolved. It doesn't feel in alignment with where our consciousness is at or where, the vision of our life is going. And so it's like as simple as a breath in and what do I need to do in this immediate now moment? What can I do? And it will always be something attainable. It will always be something accessible. It will be something like moving your arms or just like, or I went out, I was feeling really tired today. It's been a few rainy days here and before our call, and I went outside barefoot and I stood there and I did like tapping and like getting my, meridians, like waking them up and jumping jacks. And, I'll walk from the kitchen to the laundry room, kicking my legs up in the air, and just like creating, letting the body of impulse move more naturally because we get so rigid and like stuck. And that's how we get stuck in the pattern. We feel shy or we feel like we're inhibited to this body wants to move. I mean, consciousness wants to move. Their life in itself is not stagnant. It is not fixed. We are not fixed in nature. So we have movement is so key, and it helps with the embodiment, and it shakes things up. It moves things along. I always say dance moves all things forward. So if you're feeling stuck, dance moves all things forward. It clears the mind, it shifts things just a little bit enough, as you said, to see things from just a different perspective, and even changing where you're sitting within your home and seeing, like, sitting in a corner of the house that you never sit and taking in the perspective of your home from that angle. It changes your whole world. You see how the light shines in the window just a little bit differently. And you like these, or this little trinket it's just positioned in a special way that like makes you reflect on something. We have to be willing to change the pattern, and if it's difficult to access or understand how to do that from the inside out, we also can work with the external reality to support that inner shift as well. So it's kind of this as within, so without, as without, so within process. But I would say the key is, and thank God the 9 to 5 system and program is collapsing, because I think that's what stops people, a lot from being able to be their natural self. You mentioned that it's like the discomfort is like being like, what does it feel like to return to nature and natural self? What does that actually mean to be natural? We're not putting up our hands to ask to go to the bathroom and holding our pee for hours and hours. And we're not, that is so unnatural. We've been so trained to ignore our natural biological processes and natural rhythms. So I'm glad people can I work a little bit more from home, and we're not strapped to this 9 to 5 reality, because that's going to support the human being to have more availability or more permission to honor their natural physical impulses to move their body. And that's so huge. It's so swift. And I would say the other thing is sound. So it's good to talk out loud to ourselves because our vocal cords are designed perfectly as the exact scale or frequency or tones that is healing for our own body of water. And we know that water records, right? It is a record keeper. And so when we speak out loud, even if we're just thinking, we're thinking out loud, those words land over the body and we can feel the resonance, whether it's in truth or not in truth. When we speak it out loud, we can feel like, oh, that doesn't quite feel aligned or in truth, or we're speaking the truth and it's helping us to kind of feel that and process that. So our vocal cords, and it makes us want to align our words with higher vibrational thought forms as well. So we don't get stuck in the negativity. But as soon as we speak the negativity, it doesn't land well on the body. it doesn't land well in our ears. So we get right away that feedback. So we shift how we speak. And then the words land and do like this cellular massage, just like a singing bowl hits the body and vibrates the cells of the body. Our voice does the same thing over this body of water, this vessel. And we become the healers. We have the voice. You know, this is the power of the voice to heal the body. And if it's not talking words, it's just sound. And then I would say the other thing, which I love that you shared, was this bird had no words for you. It was just the impression of the bird as a symbol almost. And so symbols are becoming more powerful because we no longer want to process so much data through the intellectual channel. We are becoming beings, present beings, embodied beings in the geometry of the here and now moment. And so we're going to be more available actually to more information, but it's going to come in compact thought forms of God, I call them. They're like symbols that are this like compacted seed, which unravels the whole library of Akashic information, you know, but all we need to do is receive the impression, you know, and relax the body enough to be open just to receive and trust. And then, as you said, then the things later unraveled and sort of you got it. And the things came into, you know, you got the words and you got the understanding, but even that's not necessary. You know, it's so, yeah, it's just really exciting because it takes time to, you know, process all this information. And that's why I think returning to the body as the book, you know, or the Akashic field, and not the world history, not the Earth history Akasha, not the Matrix Akasha, but the Akasha that lives within this vessel. That is the most authentic Akashic records that you can read. Is your own spine, your own bones, your own body, and that's the information you can trust. So all of this is leading to fortifying our ability to self-trust and to trust those natural instincts and those natural impulses. And if you want to move, move. If you want to make a sound, sound. And that disrupts the old pattern. And there really isn't much room for the past to drag you down or backwards, you know. And then the other thing I would mention with regards to that question about like, how do we do it? I think a good step is to recognize if you are engaging in environments, situations, circumstances, or relationships that hold you to a past version of yourself that aren't able to see you. They aren't able to see you for who you are, because that's very difficult. You know, it is difficult to break those chains or those layers, those phantom layers that they overlay. Like you're just like your great auntie, whatever, you know, and you got told that all your life, and that's all they ever see you. But you're not that auntie. You're your own unique soul. But they can't see that, and so it's hard for you to see that in the beginning. You know, once you do have to remove yourself, and those are the difficult decisions that we have to make. Those are the risks we have to take. And it might look like not talking to a loved one for a few years, but it always comes back, you know. So we can't ignore the self, we can't go against the self, we can't harm the self any longer. If we really want to be a part of this amazing process that we're in, and kind of be riding that wave and moving along with the spiral, you know, as we move up a notch, you know. And so yeah, I would say that's probably one of the most difficult things for people first starting out, is to remove themselves from familiar places and spaces where we were in patterns of obligation, we were in patterns of martyrdom, we were in patterns of inauthenticity. And we had to do that. That's what we had to do when we moved out to the mountains, because both my husband and I are from the prairies. So that was really helpful for us to start to feel our authentic nature and really fortify ourselves in that and ground in that and strengthen ourselves in that. And then the family stuff started to heal. So it's like you said, chicken or the egg, we don't know. I think it's all happening simultaneously, but that is part of the journey. I'd say it's a pretty common, you know, part of the journey.
Yeah, no question, no question. And then the whole thing too with it's even removing the dialogue of, that comes with making a decision like that, like removing yourself from a situation, removing the judgment of self and the other, or even for me, it's like come to a place where you just go, I don't know what's going on here, but this isn't, I'm not who I am in this situation. I'm not going to externalize that, and I'm just going to go this other direction. And I agree with you. You come together once, you come together forever. And I'm not just describing my own experience. I've watched this happen with a lot of people. Like, if you go back 3, 4, 5 years ago, there was a lot more, even though there's plenty now, but there was a lot more finger pointing right before COVID hit and as COVID hit than there is now. There was a lot more discussion of boundaries. And not that there's not now, but there was a lot more then. There's the unity consciousness and the oneness is creeping through. And I think in those situations that you're talking about as well, there's also the element of what we're unconscious of within ourselves. We may not have the answer. We just know this doesn't feel right. I got to get the hell out of here. I got to go try something else. No harm, no foul. This is an extraordinary evolution that we've gone through when you consider the entanglements that we've had that were constructed or held together by the illusion of what we thought reality was and what we thought our roles were and the labels and the names and all that stuff, all the cultural impact, like what's happening is moving so quickly that there's not even time to really explain it. It is in our stories, though. And if we look back at, going back to however far we want to go, 6,000, 12,000 years, whatever. But if we go back to what we know as the indigenous, the Aboriginal, the Indians, their wisdom was held together through oral history. And there are certain things that are absolutes in the universal structure, and one of those would be that to me, at least in terms of the earth realm, and maybe beyond. It's stored in the hard drive of our soul. It's stored in the operating system of the true technology, which is us, and it's mind-blowing. It's to consider that we're reaching a point now where there's less emphasis on all the things that are wrong, and there's more emphasis on recognizing and acknowledging the familiarity we have with each other and with ourselves and our true nature. So like even in what would seem like a small example of self-love, but listening to that little still small voice that says, as you're hearing all the other voices, and all of a sudden you hear the little voice say, hey, go outside, take your shoes off, take your clothes off, get a bucket of ice water and dump it on you, or something. And then you do it. This has been my experience. And then you come out on the other side and say, whoa, that actually worked. Because a lot of times, at least the way that we were conditioned, we're looking for a push-button solution. We're looking for a guru or a yogi or someone to tell us what we need to do or someone to tell us what's wrong with us. I look at the whole thing now as a psyops. For instance, I love Carl Jung. I think he's was a great influence in the books that I read. However, I look at that now and I go, you know what? That's just part of the psyops, because it's there's lots of things in there. I'm not saying there's not good things, but again, the things that get you to a certain point don't necessarily get you to the next one. And what I mean by that is the labels of psychiatry, of mental afflictions. I saw something a couple of months ago that was talking about most of the geniuses in the world are in institutions that are identified as multiple personality or this or that. Anyone that's had any interaction with someone that was touched in that regard knows that they have a vision to the other side. If you look at the indigenous, they would allow these people space to live in one corner of the village and do whatever they want, basically. And who did they go to when they needed medicine, when they needed insight? So there's a whole bunch of components of what we thought was reality that are being struck down, flipped upside down. And we're the core of it all. How do you tell people that? How do you tell people? Like as an example, I went to the beach a couple of weeks ago, and after a few days of a particular lesson or a particular curriculum, let's just say, we got to the end and they said, well, you do realize that this world is going to go the way you want it to go. So in other words, they took the quantum entanglement, to the full degree and explained to me that I have full omniscience, it's all up to me. And of course, we know in that complicated math of the universal that there's some semblance of truth to that, but how do we not know that there's 8 billion different Earths with each one of us the god or goddess of one? How do we not know that? Or maybe they're both true. Maybe the collective 8 billion create the reality we have. That seems to be the common agreement. But this is, I don't think there's any space in between. It's an all or nothing proposition, and I feel like that's where we're at now, is to practice these things. You brought up integrity, especially, and that's what I meant, was especially in your relationship with yourself, because you can't lie to the universe. You can't lie to your higher self. And really, you can't lie to yourself because you are that, right? And my friend said the other day, I call it the me, my higher self, and I. And the reality is, it is, and that's been a lot of my mantras in the last couple of weeks as I've laid here in silence at night, which has just been, from I am soul, to I am so many other things and all of the above. It's not fluffy love and light. And anyone, including yourself, that has been journeying this path, that has reached higher and higher states of self-respect, self-love, non-judgment, and amplified sensitivities and abilities, will tell you that the so-called dark, is walking hand in hand with what we have, tried to over-identify with in terms of the light. I mean, it's a two-way street here. And really, the gold is in the shadow, I guess, when you get right down to it, which is probably why everything's coming out now on the global stage. We should do this again. It's not enough time, an hour and a half. If you're open to it.
Yeah, I'd love that, Todd. Yeah, I love these conversations. They're so much fun.
Yeah, it really is. It's your breath of fresh air. I just want to say my highest compliments and respect, blessings of peace, grace, and love to you and your beautiful family and your beautiful property and your endeavors and the service. And thank you for your service to humanity. And I will see you the next time.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Have a good day.
I'll see you again. I'll reach out to you. Take care. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.